Wasted time.
What's up YouTube, you made it to my first video and this is what we're going to make today. But since it's my first video, let me give you a quick introduction to who I am. My name is Catrou, I'm a trance and techno producer and I've been producing since I'm 16 with a couple of breaks, but last year I started to take it serious, uploaded my first tracks, started DJing, and on this channel I want to give you tips, tricks and tutorials like this one and take you with me on my journey, so maybe you can take something out of it. If you like this kind of content, make sure you follow me on my socials, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, that would help me a lot. I put a lot of effort into the video, and now let's jump into the project. I built a little arrangement for the track, but we go through that later. Let's start with the low end. So the low end in this genre is very important because we have two big parts here. On the one hand, we have that typical techno kick and rumble, and on the other hand, we have that trance, psytrance bass line. And the hard thing here is to combine both parts so that they still deliver enough power to cut through the mix. And we don't want to lose that dark and punchy techno feeling, but we also don't want to lose that uplifting and rolling trance feeling. So both parts really need to work well together. And let me show you how I did that. So for the kick, I recreated the kick in kick 3 and it's sounding like this. So as you can hear, it's very clicky, very punchy with a long tail, and that's important to deliver that techno feeling we want. Made a little bit of processing, started with the EQ and with a low cut on 20 Hz. After that, I put a drum bass on it with 20% of drives on the hard mode, but only with 10% of wetness to give the kick more punch. Same thing for the war. Here I boosted the low and the mid frequencies with 4% and 70% of wetness to add even more punch to the kick. And after that, it's very important that you do another EQ, because every time you add effects like drum bass or raw, it will add some low frequencies to your kick, and we don't want them. So I made another low cut at 30 Hz this time and took out some frequencies around 300 Hz because the kick has some unnecessary frequencies. It's a little bit of muddy frequencies, so I took them out. And at the end, I put a utility or mono. We always want our kick in mono because otherwise it will cause us phase issues or destroy your mix. Let's hear the kick without and with the effects. And with. So you can hear it's a little bit more cleaner and very punchy. For the rumble or for the sub bass, I used the operator with only one oscillator and bring up the sustain all the way to 0 and use the basic sine wave. And for the filter, I changed the filter type to OSR just to add a little bit more texture to the sub. And it's always nice to experiment with the different filter types because they're really adding something to your sound. And that's what we want in this case. And bring up the resonance to 28 just to have more punch in the sub. And after that, I use the saturator. And this is a really important step because after that, we do a very big high cut to have space for the bass line we're adding later. And if you don't add saturation, you wouldn't be able to hear enough from the sub. And that's why the saturation is very important here. So we can hear the sub one time with and without the saturation. Without. And with. So you can really hear that it's adding a lot more information in the low end. So very important step. Also adding a low cut at 30 Hz here to get rid of that unnecessary frequencies. The next thing I added is a shaper to sidechain the bass to the kick and increase the smoothness a little bit to get rid of that unwanted sound. Sometimes it's clipping when you do a shaper. So that's very important. The last thing I added here is the utility, this time on bass mono, just to allow the frequencies over 120 to be in stereo. Let's hear the kick and the sub together. So you can hear it's really tight, both parts sitting well, and that's exactly what we want. For that rolling trance bass line, I made a Serum preset that's sounding like this. So as you can hear, it's very tight with a very sharp transient. And that's very important because otherwise your bassline will get lost in the mix. And for the MIDI notes, I use the typical Psytrance pattern, where 3 notes playing between each kick. And the important thing here is to left some space between each note to give your transient more room to work. Otherwise, the transient can get lost. And the first note, I turned down the velocity because the kick is still playing here, but I don't want to lose all information from the first note to keep up that rolling feeling from the bass line. Because we use velocity information in the MIDI notes, we need to add the velocity note from Ableton to tell Serum that we are using the velocity. And for the Serum preset, it's a very technical one, so I don't go through every detail in this video. By the way, you can download the whole project file, including all the presets and all the samples, with the download link in the description. But let me give you a quick overview of the preset. I used only one wavetable here. It's a default shape, and bring the randomness and the phase all the way to 0, a little bit of detune. And for the envelopes, I used 2 envelopes. The second one is controlling the transient. So every time the note is playing, the cutoff and the drive opens, and that causes that transient we want. For the second filter, I used the diffuser filter, and this is where the magic happens, because the diffuser filter adds even more tightness and transients to your sound, and you have a lot of controls about your transient. So you can change the variation of your transient very well, and that's very nice. And the next cool thing about the diffuser is I added a key track, and this allows you to play different notes, but don't lose the transients of your bass sound, because the diffuser moves with your bass note, and that's very nice to have a clean and stable bass line even when you're playing melodies. Let's hear the bass line without the diffuser. And with. So you can really hear it tightens up, add more transient, add more power, and that's exactly what we want. You can change the filter resonance to get different sounds, and that's why that preset is so nice. And the way that works is in the FX tab, we splitted the whole frequency spectrum in 3 parts, lows, mids, and highs. And in the matrix, we assigned each split to the note tracker, and that's why the sound is able to move with your note. And as I mentioned, it's a very technical preset, so a lot of modulation going on. For example, the envelope 2 is modulated 2 times, one time with a linear curve and one time with a sharper curve, to get even more out of the transient. So after the Serum preset, it's important to do a little bit of extra processing. I started with the EQ to make space for the sub bass at around 100 Hz, and did a little bell EQ here to bring the bass even more through the mix around 1K Hz. And after that, I added a multiband dynamics because here I boosted the mid frequencies even more with a negative ratio and with 1 dB of extra gain, around 80% of wetness. And let's hear the bass without the multiband. And with. So you can hear how much more body the bass gets just with the multiband dynamic. The next thing I added is the utility and the shaper to sidechain the trance bass line with the kick. But this time we left a little bit more space for the first note so that we are still able to hear that note and we don't lose that rolling feeling we want. Map to the utility gain. And the last thing I added to the low end is glue compression on the low end group. And what that does is, as the name says, it glues your low end together. So everything is more balanced and smooth. And the way to achieve that is to have a very long attack time and a very short release time. And play around with the threshold until the needle is between 0 and 5 dB. And if you have gain reduction, you can use the makeup to have the same loudness as before. And one very important step in the glue compressor is to use the sidechain filter. This one controls which frequency spectrum is controlled. So by default, it's a high pass filter, so the lows are not affected that much. Let's hear the low end without the glue compression. And with. So you can hear we don't add any volume, but it smoothens things out and helps the quieter parts to be more present in the mix. And yeah, that's it for the low end. The first sound of the synth group is that iconic chorus sound. You can hear that a lot in these kind of productions. And I tried to rebuild it in Serum. It's not perfect, but I think it's good enough to work with. And this is what it sounds like. And the way I did that sound is in Serum, I used the standard wavetable and with a lot of unison to get a very bright and wide sound. I used 3 envelopes here. The first envelope is just controlling the shape of the sound with a longer release time. And the second 2 envelopes are controlling the filters. Envelope 2 is a little bit longer, and envelope 3 is very short with low attack time and low decay. And the first filter is controlling the lows and open up the cutoff while the note is playing to get that bump in the sound. And the second filter is just pushing the lows to really focus the sound on the mid-range. I put on a multiband compressor to boost the highs and the mid a little bit of distortion for the high and mid frequencies, a little bit of reverb, equalizer, and equalizer is modulated by envelope 3 to give that mid-range a little boost at the beginning of the note. And after that, I splitted the mid and side to have a little bit more control of the side and the mid frequency. And yeah, that's basically it for this preset. The second sound in the synth group is that transition sound in the build-up. And that's basically the first sound. I only increased the attack time so that the sound opens slowly. And after that, I added a trance gate. And that's the only additional plugin I used for this project because it's for free. And on the Kilohertz website, you can download a pack of free plugins, and all of them are very good. I use them a lot, so you should definitely go there and check it out. And after that, I used the EQ with a little automation to open up the filter, just to give it a little bit more movement. And at the end, a utility with 140% width to give the sound more stereo. The next sound is that basic 303 sound. It comes with Ableton. And this sound is very important because it brings a lot of movement to the track and that acid feeling, and that's what we want. The MIDI pattern here is very simple. Just play around until it sounds nice. Play around with the setting here. It's always nice to modulate them. Did a high and low cut here because that's the important range we want. And also increase the width to 180%. The fourth sound in the synth group is another melody with another Serum preset. And I put that section right before the build-up starts, just to build more tension right before the build-up. And the melody sounds like this. So it's really introducing that build-up section, right? And the way I did the preset is very simple. I used 2 wavetables here. The first one is the basic thought wave, and the second one is the default shape. I tweaked a little bit the phases here and put the randomness to 0. A little bit of unison on the second wavetable to give more whiteness to the sound. And a very plucky envelope. And just 1 filter with a high cut. And just a little bit of reverb here and the equalizer. That's basically it for this preset. Put a little bit of compression here. After that, I added the EQ with a low cut, and I modulated the frequency of the low cut so that the sound is closing right before the build-up starts to build even more tension and prepare the listener that something gonna happen now. Let's hear this section in context.
Where's the time? Freedom, love, trust, unite. Freedom, love, trust, unite. Freedom, love, trust, unite. Freedom, love, freedom, love, freedom, love. Where's the time?
And that's it for the synth group. For the drum group, I kept it very simple. It's just a basic 909 hi-hat with a little bit of reverb and a delay on 30% wetness to give that rolling feeling. So with and without. You can hear that movement. And then I put another track with the same hi-hat, just with a different reverb setting and the pedal effect, to give it a nice reverb and a little bit of distortion. For the third drum sound, I just put a close hi-hat into the simpler with a little bit of delay and a basic MIDI pattern. And with that delay, you have a little bit of movement and more variation to the sound. And did a bit of EQing, and that's it. Next sound in the drum group is a clap, and it's sounding like this. So I called it crunchy clap because I added saturation and pedal to it with the distortion mode. A little bit of reverb and EQing. And this is a nice way to add more dirtiness to your drum section. And it really works well, really simple, and yeah, gives more power to your drums. Let's hear all drums together. Really simple, but really effective. And that's it for the drums. Let's move on to the vocals. So for the vocals, I used a technique to transform my own voice into a female voice. And the vocals sounding like this.
Freedom, love, trust, unite.
But because I used a bunch of paid plugins for that, it's not part of this video, but you can also leave a comment in the comment section if you want to see a full breakdown of how I did that vocals. But the vocal samples are part of the project file, so if you want to use them, you can do that, of course. The last group in this project is the FX group, and the first sound is a synth step, sounding like this. And sounds like this also helping to build tension and prepare the listener for the next section going on. We can hear this sound one time in context.
Freedom, love, trust.
So you can hear it really blends one section into another. And I did that sound in Serum, very simple. Just a default shape with a lot of unison and 2 envelopes with a long attack time. Add a little bit of noise here and just a basic delay and a reverb to add more whiteness to the sound. Basic EQ after it. The second sound is a bit more complex, but also very simple. And it's a typical psytrance step. And this sound is very important because it's adding that psytrance vibe and darkness to the track. And that's what we want, right? So it's almost playing every 4 bars in the track. And especially when it comes to the drop, it's adding more power. And let's hear it one time in the drop.
Where's the time?
And I made this sound also in Serum and used 2 wavetables this time. One default shape for the base of the sound with 0 randomness. And the second wavetable is a Scout preset to add this texture of the sound. Use 3 different envelopes. The first envelope is controlling the cutoff of the first filter. The second envelope is controlling the cutoff of the second filter. And the third envelope is controlling the FX. I used the Bode FX here. It just gives a nice body to the sound and more warmth to it. And I modulated the feedback with the envelope 3. Then I added compression to add a little bit of extra gain. And the last thing I added here is a filter. And this one is really cool. I used the Phase 48 filter and I mapped the macro 1 to it. So you can achieve different variation of the sound. Let me play it one time. So as you can hear, you can get a little bit of different variations of the sound, which is quite cool. Variation is always good. The third FX here is a simple sweep down. Just added the EQ for the lows and that's it. And the fourth sound is reverse cymbal. Just added a little bit of reverb and of course the EQ. And the last FX sound is a long pan sweep. That means it panned to the left and the right, and then I recorded it. Yeah, and that's it. Let's hear all the FX together. And yeah, that's it for the project. I really hope you learned something and that my English wasn't too bad. I'm still working on it. Feel free to download the project and play around with the samples and the presets by yourself. Use them for your own productions. And I would love to read your feedback and questions in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you like this video. That would help me a lot. And now we will listen to the full track. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.